Hello. Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to today's Bangalore Legal Forum panel. I'm truly delighted to have you all here at the Bangalore International Centre and for what promises to be a very engaging and thought provoking evening. Our theme today is the Digital Health Revolution Regulatory Framework for Data Protection. As healthcare increasingly shifts to the digital space, questions of data security, privacy, and regulation have become more important than ever. This discussion aims to shed light on these critical issues. Before we begin, I would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to Manipal Law School, National Law School of India University, and St. Joseph's College of Law. The Bangalore Legal Forum is a monthly series of panel discussions designed to foster legal knowledge sharing and collaboration between legal education institutions and industry. The goal here is to improve public legal awareness and create a platform for meaningful legal discourse. Now, I would like to hand over the mic to my colleague Pragati here, who would introduce our esteemed panelists. So,
Privileged to introduce our distinguished panelists. To begin with, we have Dr. Roli Mathur, scientist and head of the Bioethics Unit, ICMR, and a leading authority on ethics and data governance. Then we would like to welcome Dr. Murali Srinivasan, Chief of Medical Service of our own Manipal hospitals, who brings the healthcare provider perspectives on patient data protection. We would also like to welcome Dr. Manik Sethi, Assistant Professor of Psychiatry, and IMHNS, highlighting the sensitivity of mental health data. We also have Dr. Sushil Kumar, Project Manager of Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, which we generally knows as government scheme of Karnataka offering insight on digital health policy and implementation. Last but not the least, I would like to welcome our very own Assistant Professor, Sachin Satyarajan from Manipal Law School, Mahe, Bengaluru, an international lawyer with over a decade of experience whose work span is in digital governance, global health, and public policy. Please join me in welcoming our panelist and moderator with a round of applause. India's healthcare system is undergoing a remarkable digital transformation, while the promise better access and efficiency. It also raises a vital question about privacy, ethics, and regulatory safeguards. Today's discussion will unpack these challenges and explore the way forward. I would like to call the Assistant Professor Sachin Satyarajan to lead us into this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you for all the panelists for accepting our invite. And we are very happy to have you on this panel discussion. So today's topic is on the digital health revolution in India. COVID-19, as we all know, was a watershed moment which pushed the world into a digital health movement where we needed telemedical platforms, we needed advanced disease surveillance tools. So there was a proliferation of digital health technologies, and that was facilitated by the requirements of the pandemic. And even though the WHO strategy on digital health for 2020-25 had paved the path for an international, for all countries to join the digital health movement, I think after COVID-19, India had come up with a lot of regulatory and legal measures to address some of the demands of the new digital health architecture. Right, and we are all familiar with some of these emerging technologies. We see a lot of application of artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain technologies, precision medicine. So there are so many of these new developments which require robust data sharing mechanisms, privacy, proper protection of patient data privacy, and also governing architecture so that we can balance the benefits and risks of the proliferation of these technologies. So today's panel will be looking at 6 major issues. The first one we'll be looking at is the major developments in digital health globally and within the Indian scenario. Second, we look at the sensitivity of health data and the privacy concerns coming up with the sharing of health data. Third, we look at adequacy of legal and regulatory framework in India to deal with these privacy concerns. Fourth, we address the secondary use of health data for research and commercial purposes. Fifth, we address the debate between data minimization versus continuity of care. And finally, we look at how we can ensure equity and access in a country like India, where governance is complex because of the way the demography is. So to start, I don't want to waste any more time. To start with our Dr. Sushil, who is representing Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. We want to understand the implementation of the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission and the rollout of the unique health IDs, the ABHA IDs. So can you trace the development of some of the implementation measures that the government has been taken so far?
Good evening, all. So, I work as the project manager and senior consultant for Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, which is a program, or rather, I would say, which is a mission more than a program, which is run by the National Health Authority under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. The state is the implementation authority for this mission, and this mission basically aims to create this digital public infrastructure, which we are all aware of how we have Aadhaar, UPI, etc., as digital public infrastructures and pipelines and protocols that the government has set largely for a digital India. In a similar line, we now are looking at providing digital public infrastructure for digitizing healthcare data in the most standardized way that could be possible in the current scenario. And to start with, we have three registries that are built in, and it is a unique ID for patients, that is Ayushman Bharat Health Account, ABHA, a unique ID for every doctor and nurse and other healthcare practitioners, that is the Healthcare Professional Registry, and a unique ID for Health Facility Registry, I mean for all the health facilities, which includes laboratories, diagnostics, pharmacies, private and public hospitals, clinics, everything. So now these registries are basically managed and maintained by the National Health Authority, and there are some pipelines and protocols which are built in. One of the most important ones is the consent manager, that is at the core of the whole mission, which is called Health Information Exchange Consent Manager, HIECM. And the second is the Unified Health Interface, which is more like a UPI for healthcare data, and even named pretty similarly. UPI and UHI are very similar to here, and envisage how they work as well. And the third and most important, which will be a game changer, is the National Health Claims Exchange, which plans to standardize and enable sharing of claims records, that is the assurance and insurance records which are created in a hospital for between a payer and a provider relationship. So it tries to solve that traffic and the hurdles that are there in this pipeline as well. So these are the major components that we look at, and the whole mission is based on, again, the India architecture, which we are aware of, where we have common registries or identifiers, and we have a layer of consent managers and other services, and at the top is a culmination of the front end of services which can be used by each and every citizen, which you see as the DigiYatra, which you see as the DigiLocker, which you see as the UPI, Beam. Everything is built on this particular architecture called India. And this India architecture, as based on Aadhaar majorly for the identity purposes, in the same way, ABHA is also an identity made based on Aadhaar largely, though there are other ways to create it as well. But why did we need a separate ID when we already had Aadhaar is a common question, and I'm quite sure, since all of you are from a background of law, you would understand that the Aadhaar Act really doesn't allow for interoperability to function in its truest manner, right? So to basically circumvent the restrictions that the Aadhaar Act puts on us, we had to have a separate health ID called the Ayushman Bharat Health Account. Now, using these IDs or identifiers or masters, what we call in a very technological term, what we create now is a large bunch of solutions. The solutions will encompass hospital management systems, laboratory management systems, personal health records applications, pharmacy management systems. All of this will now comply to certain common standards where the HL7 based, I'm not sure how well aware you may be of these terminologies. So we have some data standards called, HL7, the health level 7, which is an international standard for storing data and sharing data across devices and systems. Based on this system, now we have something called as FHIR, Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resource, which is a standard for EMRs. EMRs are electronic medical records. The true clinically rich data that we generate through any system is basically loosely worded as EMR. Now, from this standards being set into the set of compliant solutions and softwares that I am talking about, will ensure one thing, that is interoperability. That is the main agenda that ABDM has, to ensure that the person or the citizen becomes the true owner of the data and not the hospitals who generate this data now. And the patient will now decide where the data goes to only with his or her consent, and the hospitals will also have to comply to certain standards by using only ABDM compliant systems, though nothing is mandatory as of now. We are only saying that this is something that is desirable. If you do it, we are going to keep on working in the siloed manner that we still do, because breaking silos in India is a Herculean task, and not just in India, anywhere. So instead of going the head-on way of breaking the fabricated structure, we want to basically ensure that you keep on using the same software you are happy with, but just comply to the standard so that now data can be interoperable and the patient is benefited by seeing all the health records at one place. I don't have to worry about the hard files that I have had, the CT scan which was 2 feet by 2 feet size, which was kept in my almirah and I don't really remember where it was. Maybe I changed my city also. So how do I access these things? It's a very challenging thing when it comes to patients. So it is basically to benefit the patients. So this is largely what ABDM does. A patient visits a hospital, uses his ABHA ID, a health record is created, and he visits another hospital. The hospital doctor requests for the record, patient gives the consent, and this record now is shared to the other doctor. So this is the crux of what ABDM is trying to do, and we'll get into other aspects later.
Yes, so
Probably.
thank you, Dr. Sushil, for clarifying the government's vision for what a unified health interface will look like and the level of interoperability the government hopes to achieve through the Ayushman Bharat digital mission. Now, coming to Dr. Srinivas, so we see the government's perspective. We would like to understand what the private players are thinking. What are some of the digital health technologies that are being adopted by your organization, and how do you see the future of healthcare delivery changing in India in the current context?
Okay, thank you very much. I think before we go, I think you're all law students, so something we would, very, very well summarized by Dr. Sushil on ABDM. But, although the question is going to come, one aspect we have to look at it is that while, we do everything with a good intent and good this thing, so the law and other things are so complex, you can always find a fault in the whole system. So, but what are we trying to do with the overall thing is to minimize that to an extent possible. Now, as hospitals, so the first thing, this is a landmark, achievement as far as NHA and the country is concerned. First, what I did is, as soon as the patient, it is called as the ABHA, that is health account opened, I registered and got my 14-digit ID. And then the moment, a few months later, all this was about 3 years back, roughly, And meaning post-COVID this happened, and then the moment health registry happened, meaning professional registry, I just got them done. The whole idea was to see how seamless is it and other, so that we could do it. So if you look at it, it's quite seamless. It has a linkage either to your Aadhaar or various other any other methodologies where you could give to have your identity. Now the challenge comes is to have a platform where all this can interact. Today, all of us will have to, meaning we may know that many records are either in the paper format or paper scanned format. Scanned format is still not digital format. And some of them are in the digital format. So to get all of them together, because a scanned format cannot speak to a digital format. Maybe a couple of years artificial intelligence will try and help you out. This is one aspect, one challenge which we are having. The second challenge is that, good healthcare systems, say in our systems, we are easily able to link, because again, there are 3 levels of compliance. If I'm for the hospitals to be ABA sort of compliant so if you are even at level 1, level 2, which is good enough, a patient comes, he can register for you and he can register simultaneously with ABA. And if he gives the right consent, you can link both of them. So that way, there could be even a flow. One click of a button, it could go in. But the amount, people has to also understand this, and they will have to do it. So that the challenge today is that these hospital electronic records should be able to speak to the ABA account, which I think they are again trying a lot, which again has to be HL7 compliant. And then patients will have to adopt it. And then the third and the most important thing, again, I'm sure as we go, we could discuss. There are times where patients are not in a position to give independent consent. Patient may be unconscious. Patient may be, there could be various the things. So there are no clarities in that. Although we go by, what is the good practice, rather than some of them do not have a. If you go strictly by legal, sometimes you have to really locate at, the surrogate and whether there is a consent and so on. So it has been adopted. And last but not the least, health is still a state subject, as we were discussing. So unless some form of enforcement is there, it becomes difficult for it to get scaled up quickly. What is happening today is that, say, if we have to go for a licensing in, say, in a particular thing, the government says, encourages, pushes, nudges you to get ABA registered. I'm sure over a period, insurance may come to an extent and say, hospitals will have to get ABA registered, patients may have to get ABA registered, and the industry forces will slowly, drive it. So at this point, a lot of work has started to happen, but I think a lot of miles to go for, ABA to get integrated into a normal healthcare. But yes, it has, meaning a lot of progress has happened.
Thank you, Dr. Murali. You've clarified some of the major concerns from the hospital perspective and in terms of implementation. Now, let's start with the patient's perspective and what their concerns are. And when we see some of these digital health databases across the globe, so we have seen a lot of breaches. Like, for instance, the UK National Health Scheme, there has been multiple breaches. There has also been breach of data when it comes to like private players, like the 23andMe genetic data breach was also all over the news. So I think there are some of these concerns from a patient's perspective, and there are also major implications, right? So will this affect my insurance claims in the future? Will there be familial implications if some of this data relating to transfer of genetic disorder from mother to child is made available in public domain? Also, what about disease status, like mental health status or your HIV status? So we see that there are major concerns. So coming to Dr. Sethi, we are trying to understand the second question, which is the sensitivity of the health data and the potential for discrimination. So we understand that the Digital Personal Data Protection Act does not recognize health data as a separate category of sensitive data. So the initiatives like NIMHANS, Telemanas, how do you approach this issue?
So, if you've read the act, which, I did, because being a part of Telemanas and, uh, being a part of this, Institute of National Importance, it was important for us to go through what the act says. So the act, just to summarize, the act has 9 chapters and, 44 sections. So the act, has very well put, although it does not, like you rightly mentioned, that it does not, give the health data as a special mention. But a lot of these provisions in the act make a lot of sense, and if applied to healthcare data, it really solves a lot of our issues when we talk about it. So one of the sections does talk about having all the data in India, and the data principle, which is basically the patient, when they are providing the consent for having their data digitized. So what the data fiduciary, which is as hospitals, what they need to do is they need to have a data processing partner, which is one of these companies which will process data for you. One of the important mentions in these subsections is that all this data has to be in servers which are in India. So you cannot have these servers outside. And in the section 9 and the chapter 9, if I'm not wrong, they lay down strict penalties if the data fiduciary, if there is any data breach. And who is responsible for the data breach and having all this data is the data fiduciary. Despite having data processors, despite having contracts with data processors, the data processor will not be penalized. It will be the data fiduciary which will be penalized. So all of it comes back to the hospital. All of the responsibility, I'm not sure if it is good or if it is bad, but the act says so as of now. So when it comes to mental health data, it is one of the most sensitive data. If we talk about India, India is one of the few countries which have specific laws for mental health. We have the Mental Health Care Act of 2017, which we don't have an act for any other disease or any other disorder. So specifically, we have an act for mental health care. So because the government realizes how sensitive this data is, and that how important these regulations are, because of these disorders being, or people with mental health disorders being stigmatized or being ostracized before, and even now, for example. So for this data, what we currently are doing at Telemanas is, we have our servers at IIIT Bangalore. We don't share the data. The ministry is very strict. So NIMHANS and the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare are the data fiduciaries, for all the data which is collected. So all of it is pseudo-anonymized. All the data which we collect, whenever we get a call from anyone, across the country. So we have, just to sum it up for you guys, Telemanas is a national mental health program. So it's a comprehensive mental health care solution. It is not a helpline where you call and you receive help. It is a full-fledged mental health care comprehensive program. We also call it as the digital arm of the district mental health program. So we have counselors at the the lowest level, where they attend these calls of people with distress, and if they feel that it is a disorder which needs to be looked at by a professional, by a psychiatrist, by a doctor, so they kind of escalate it there. So when just to give you a run through of how this happens is, if you're someone who's calling up 14416, which is the Telemanas helpline number, which is the Telemanas line number. So, a counselor who's been trained for 50 hours at NIMHANS, by NIMHANS partners, because we're the Apex Center, and there are other 5 mentoring institutes which are there. So, they will receive your call, they will ask you about, your concerns. And when the call happens, the number is masked. So the counselor does not know, and there is no provision for him to go back and call you back. So although there's an IVR which says if the counselor is busy, you can, request a call back. So for that, again, it is anonymized. The counselor does not have any, any way that they can call you back or they can identify you. So if they feel that no, there is a disorder, or this person has some suicidal ideation, this person needs immediate help, which a psychiatrist would be able to do better, they escalate it immediately to a psychiatrist. So each cell has 2 or 3 psychiatrists in it. So we have 53 cells across all states. So these 53 cells, so all these psychiatrists, they will be able to help out the patients when they require help. So again, the only person, there are instances where data we have to understand where the person is calling from, and we have to breach the confidentiality. So those are, very, very few limited cases which, DPDP under section 7 and 17 give you provisions and exceptions where, you can, breach the confidentiality and you can look at the data. But that also in Telemanas, that provision is only at the highest level. So as an assistant professor, there are, other people who have that provision. So we, coordinate with IIITB, and then we can unmask the number and, have the police coordinate, or we can have, and there are, multiple stories which I can share with you where, we've helped close the loop with the help of the state government and, with the help of other, partners in place. So we take care, and, because of the provisions which have come up with DPDP, the data is, very well taken care of, specifically, mental health data.
So thank you for addressing that question on the sensitivity of mental health data, and also clarifying how a telemedicine platform like Telemanas functions, and the different safeguards that are built into the system so that there can be privacy ensured for the patients. Now coming to Dr. Roli. The Indian Council for Medical Research is not a regulator. We understand that. But the ICMR guidelines has been very crucial in shaping India's scientific research ethics. And the guidelines have been very helpful in anticipating some of these concerns and responding to it. So what is your assessment of the current governance architecture when it comes to digital health, especially in comparison with global standards like the HIPAA in the US or the GDPR in the European Union? What is your assessment? Is it robust enough to tackle some of these issues raised by digital health?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for this invitation to discuss this very important topic. So ICMR has a long history of developing guidelines and policy statements, and the ICMR guidelines have in detail talked about issues related to privacy and confidentiality, respect for persons. And very recently we came up with the new guidelines on research around artificial intelligence and use of artificial intelligence in healthcare. We don't have a separate policy as of now for digital health, but we would say that the issues are very, the similar issues, and therefore we are talking a lot about data. And we do have in the ICMR National Guidelines of 2017, section number 11, which has addressed things related to data as well as samples. But data and samples have been handled together in the chapter as the issues remain same. And if we look at the concerns, India is a very it's not at all a homogeneous population the way our concerns from the ethics point of view come in that category, because we are looking at India as a very homogeneous, and we're talking about access, we are talking about people's understanding about what is digital health, or how does this data actually impact them. I would say a large population would not at all completely understand what is the importance of this data. Unfortunately, consent is on paper. It's really never implemented the way we would like to implement it. It's signing a sheet of paper, and in digital world, it would be clicking on a yes without reading through the fine lines which are there, which is a long, a sort of language. No, it's not so. Okay. So that has been the experience that we have seen from our work around medical research areas, that informed consent requires, it's not just consent. We talk about informed consent and extending it to process, that it's a process of, it's not a one-time event of just collecting an approval from a person. So we have to really understand that, how can this be made explicit and specific? If we are looking at the provisions in the DPDP Act, it talks about making consent explicit, and then talking about patient-centric. And so there's a lot of, adjectives that are there. And patient centricity also means it has to be in simple language. It has to be explained in a form, in a language, in a manner that they understand. So is it only we are thinking of English as a language, or are we thinking about, because I'm not sure how we are really working on the details, the granularity of all these things to implement on the ground, because when we talk of consent, we're also talking about the competency of a person to understand. And then whether they are able to comprehend the information, and who is going to, I know there's a consent manager, and but then who is actually on the ground going to ensure that this consenting, and then they have a right to withdraw their consent, and how does that work out? So there are a lot of, I think, details that need to be worked out. For research, there is, of course, a better framework that is there. We have the new drugs and clinical trial rules. We have the ICMR guidelines, even though they are not directly regulatory, but since Chapter 4 of New Drugs and Clinical Trial Rules states that all biomedical and health research must follow ICMR ethical guidelines, and therefore indirectly, any biomedical and health research in India becomes regulated indirectly through the NDCT rules, and so that is there. But also, a lot of time we see that patients are asked to sign or to give consent. And that consent is, if they don't give consent, they don't get access to care. So we have to also understand that how are we going to distinguish between these two types of consent that we may have to deal with. One is to deal with the medical care or treatment, and the second would be about their data, and is it a separate consent, are we talking about, or we are making it all together. And then there may be a third consent needed, because if you have to share this information with insurers, as we discuss this through, because tomorrow insurance companies would like to have all this information, then would they be able to understand the impact of this data sharing that may happen, and on their treatment, or in their the amount that they have to pay as premium to the insurance companies may get up much higher. So all these, there are so many angles to this whole story. I think we need a debate, and also we need to work very much in detail to work on all these aspects, and not to take consenting as just like as simple as it looks like. I think it's a bit more complex than that. Thank you.
Yes, so the informed consent standard laid down by the bioethical guidelines is quite comprehensive, and it's applicable to research ethics. So this brings us to the third point. What are we going? This data that we are generating is extremely valuable, right? The anonymized health data of the Indian citizens can be used for both public health research purposes, right? So public epidemiology, and it can also have commercial purposes like development of medical countermeasures. We can build AI-based technologies based on this. So this data is very valuable, right? But at the same time, how foolproof is anonymization of health data? For instance, genetic data cannot be fully anonymized, but the implications of genetic data is huge. It can be used for solving crimes. It has familial implications. It has implications in terms of disease predictions, right? So we see the complexity there, the valuable nature of the data and its far-reaching implications. So what are some of the safeguards and governance mechanisms that exist so that we can see to it that we can reap maximum benefits out of this data for public health research, and we can build health technologies based on it while not compromising patient privacy? And this is an open question. Anyone can take this.
So, like I was talking about, the DPDP Act. So Section 7 and 17, subsection B, they're very clear about, what you can do with the data and what you cannot do with the data. So there are exemptions with respect to research. But then, these exemptions also come with, certain responsibilities which are there for the data fiduciary. So which come under the section 6 and 7, which talk about, which is similar to what GDPR has about, data minimization and, limitation. So these are important concepts which we need to understand. So when you're taking consent, and like ma'am very rightly pointed out, consent is has to be at a very granular level for all the data which we collect, according to the new act. So every time, like Dr. Roli was pointing out, that for taking, so the consent, so there is a double consent burden, rather triple consent burden at the physician level. So when you're taking consent for treatment first, then you're taking consent for the data which you're going to be collecting from the patient. Then you have to take consent if you're going to be using it for research. There's another consent which you have to take from the patient. So all this is extremely important, and that has to be in the person's language which the person understands. It has to be done, it is not like, there's a lot of consent burden which we see, with patients, and there's a lot of consent burden on the consent fatigue in terms of patients, and there's a lot of consent burden on the physician, which, or the researcher which is there. But at the same time, what is important is the aspects of data, minimization, which has been laid out in the DPDP Act, where whatever data is important has to be collected. You can't collect, information which is not relevant to you. But again, these are general rules. These are not specific for healthcare. So these are for, the telecom industry. These are for, other places, insurance, where people collect data which is not necessary. So data which, might not help the patient. For, let's talk about the healthcare sector. So for example, it's given, this example is given in the Act. They say if a telemedicine company, is asking you for data for all your contacts which are there in your list, that is not required. I mean, why will the telemedicine company require all the contacts? Why do you give consent for that? So they, by law, cannot ask you for all the contacts, even if you consent for it. So this is something, which is, these are provisions which are there, so under the Act. So using of this data and sharing this data, you will have to take another third consent. So practically, it will become extremely difficult. So unless the patient, recognizes, or the patient is, again, if you're commercializing the data, what is the patient going to gain from it? Are you giving them certain discounts? Are you giving them certain, benefits? Yeah. Are you sharing these benefits with the patient? If you're not, and there is another provision which is there in the Act, which is pretty good, is, they can ask for the data to be erased any time which they want. Once they've finished with collecting their data, at any time they can take their consent back, and they say that, I want you to erase the data. So these are certain aspects which are going to be extremely difficult in the healthcare industry, because, once the data is collected, you would obviously need it. We're forming the ABHA area, and we have, we are trying to get, the Ayushman Bharat digital mission started. So it's going to be extremely difficult when we are unable to trace back what the patient had. So each consultation will become a new consultation if the patient says that, I want my data to be erased. So these are certain things, which will probably be discussed later with the government. We've written to the government, we are discussing with them, with the ministry, that how do we, you need to make specific rules for the healthcare sector.
No, just to take it from where Sir had left, we have had requests, where the patients are saying that, my health record, meaning they have been following up for the last, say, 8 years, 10 years. Now I want my health record to be taken out. And as per the new DPDP Act, you will have to take it out. And suppose if that same patient, I'm saying, so this is, if that same patient who has had, this is not a live case, this is just a hypothetical situation, who has had multiple medical problems, and then, his records is taken out, and he comes back again, and he or she says, I never had this history in the past. And if he gives it as new, and that I have no other medical history, you as a medical professional, you'll have to take that, on the face value. So I'm just saying, these are the complex situations. But the other important thing, I'm sure as lawyers you would know, the DPDP Act is applicable only for digital. If it is in a paper form, none of this Act is applicable. Now the question is, what is digital? Something you scan, is that also digital? It's not very clear. We have to assume that it is digital. So there are, again, hospitals, some of them are smaller hospitals, are probably a little more scared to go into a digital system, ecosystem, because why should I, expose myself to more problems? And, so that is another area, so where, that meaning, so unless there is also some motivation, I know, I'm just giving you an example. Now, when accreditation came, hospitals were told if there is an accreditation, they get a better benefit in terms of monetary benefits, whether it is insurance or whether it is Ayushman Bharat and various other schemes. So they all went for that. So I think somewhere, this thing would also have, because they are saying, why should smaller nursing homes, smaller clinics, why should I go into this headache? Another point is on consenting. One of the, meaning, of course, it's little, may not be relevant to this topic, but I think as legal, you would know. This is, I've heard it from another colleague of mine in a different hospital system. There was a 28-year-old lady or young lady, sort of, who had come to a hospital. They found her creatinine, that is the kidney functions, to be significantly abnormal, but she was not having symptoms, some very minimal symptoms. But kidney functions were so abnormal that she needed dialysis, because if they don't do it, there is a chance things could go wrong. And, she was absolutely normal, compos mentis, absolutely in her senses. She said, I don't want it. I'm absolutely fine, I don't want it. And nobody can, force the dialysis. She says, I will be in the hospital. I want to be in the hospital. Let me see. I will decide, and the creatinine kept increasing. And, so every day, it is also important that they have to document not just that she's not wanting. It is that if I don't do, these things can happen, including you may die. So I'm just saying it's a significantly complex situation. So now the question is, if you're going to digitalize all this, and also, so there is as such, in consenting a process on that, so with DPDP, it all becomes a little more, sort of, the whole thing becomes a little more complex. So just wanted you all to understand how the complexity is. Some things are not so straightforward. And Madam talked about also, the processes which are laid down. They are very good, but unfortunately, in a busy running hospital, say Nimans or others, to do many of them in spirit and intent becomes a little difficult, And also because when in a research, the number of people whom we are is much lesser, whereas OPD would be some in thousands. So while these practical challenges are there, and tomorrow someone will come even with the UHID, meaning UHI, this thing, he will come and say that these are the things, there could be a facilitator who is going to probably do all the consenting for you, So these are all the complexities which is there. Maybe we may not have a solution, but somewhere we have to understand, that's where maybe some of this, when it comes to a legal case, when your guys are arguing, you have to look at the overall intent, why things were created, what things went behind before, and probably that will help.
Yeah, so thank you for the comments. And I just wanted to also bring attention to the fact that sometimes, data, now, who are the people who are handling data? They are usually data scientists, who are generally from the non-medical field. They are engineers, and, so for them, whether it is a traffic data or a health data, so they treat that as same. And they think that now, at least, the way software is developing, that, you can develop apps. And so it's very important to understand that when it comes to health, it is dealing with humans, and it is directly going to impact health of individual or their treatment decisions, or, there are many implications of how this data is collected, analyzed, used, how fair it is, how representative it is concerning the size of the country, and, the diversity that we have. So I don't know how to handle that part, because ICMR may have made a guideline, But who are the followers of the guidelines? The guidelines followers would be only doctors, because that's the medical fraternity who goes to ICMR website. Why would somebody who does not belong to the biomedical and health research arena even look at the guidelines? So this is one of the challenge we are having in the dissemination of the guidelines and to ensuring that it is being implemented, because we talk about responsible AI, for example, but we're talking about human in the loop. But how do we know all these things are happening in this whole? So of course, for Ayushman Bharat, and these are for public health, so here we are not dealing with research as such, and therefore but we are doing a lot of tools development is happening without having doctors on board the way they should be on board, or they should be constructively providing input. Because if the data standards that are being used have an inherent bias, then the product is not going to yield the outcomes that we are looking at. So these are some important concerns. And many a times we have to also see that whether this is for patient welfare or there is a profit motive, because there is a lot of work in the digital space which is around profit. So this is another angle to the whole thing, that there is so it may not actually cater to the needs of the people, but it may have a different motive. So I mean, these are just food for some thought.
If I can just tell some aspects how we are really trying to solve this difficult problem of anonymization. The first question that you asked, whether there actually is something which is truly anonymized, is a very, very, very difficult, has a very difficult answer to it. And it doesn't mean it is impossible, but you need to think in a very, very specific manner on case-to-case basis. So some data set may feel anonymized in some situation, but then it could be de-anonymized pretty easily. But the same set of rules, if you follow for a certain other data set, it may still be fairly anonymized, right? So it is not that it is not the mechanism doesn't exist. It all burns down to the point that sir was trying to make about the purpose of collecting data, right? We should be very, very clear about the purpose of collecting data. And I was in fact discussing with sir before the panel that in Karnataka government we have something called as Karnataka Open Data Policy, which came in way before the whole DPDP Act came in. It is primarily to define how exactly do we share data. It is nothing to do about storing personal or privacy, but it is all about how do we share data. How do we classify something that can be shared on an open platform or not share on an open platform. We have had discussions with IISc in this regards, and NHA is also working on simplifying the consent mechanism by breaking the steps, right? So now if we are trying to anonymize data for use by researchers, one thing is, the main issue is whatever data we are collecting through this structured FHIR bundles should be stored in an anonymized manner, and that needs the consent of the patient, right? Now that doesn't mean we ask for another consent. So how do we make a consent which encompasses all the steps of data collection? We are not getting into the clinical part yet. See, clinical consent taking is altogether a different entity, and I don't think there is an easy answer to it, because as such clinical science is fairly complicated and it differs from person to person, patient to patient. We're not getting into that. But when we are talking about data collection, so the NHA is actually working on a consent which will try to solve the issue of being able to collect data only for anonymization. How do we share this anonymized data can again be governed with requests, audits of logs, and a strong mechanism of maker checker, where the checker will be always the government or the significant data fiduciary that the DPDP Act states as, and the maker would be the person who requests for that, like a research entity, right? So there are ways and means to do it. It just needs more deliberation. and we'll solve it at some point of time, is what I am hoping for, because we are on the path to solve it.
But thank you for clarifying that the health data cannot be fully anonymized, and there is no, currently we cannot guarantee that, right? And I think this is one of the biggest criticisms of the DPDP Act, because it doesn't really look at health specific issues. And that's also probably one of the reasons why we have looked at health sector specific regulations like Disha, for instance, and to see where we can respond to the concerns specific to the healthcare sector. And anonymization. Sometimes the data that I might have withdrawn my data, and my data might not be available on a public database. But if one of my family members had given their data regarding maybe like something like genetic data, which is so permanent and innate, it can be traced back to me. So there have been instances in other jurisdictions where crimes have been solved because some of the family members gave their genetic profile and it was traced back to this person. So that's all one of those unique risks when it comes to health data, and probably why we have been looking at a health sector specific regulation. And also maybe, as Dr. Roli had pointed out, there's also an absence of a healthcare specific regulator. I guess ICMR does not have the status of a regulator. So some of these regulations do address these issues, the 2017 regulations especially, but there is no way for any agency to come step in and enforce these regulations in the current scenario. Now coming to the last point, which is regarding equity and access. So we are trying to create something like Ayushman Bharat in a country like India. There's a huge urban-rural divide. There's a digital divide. Can you say some of those examples where you have tried to, the mission has tried to address some of these loopholes?
So this is inherent in the country of India, that it is always going to be diverse. If not now, even 50 years down the lane, I would say that the diversity would still exist. I mean, that's majorly got to do with the so-called digital divide. But I would try to give a certain optimism to the whole thing, because I'm quite sure it is difficult. I mean, every question that is being asked here is quite difficult to answer. I'm very sure. But there has to be some optimism to see to it that we are going in the right direction, right? So when we talk about this aspect of digital divide, we should always remember that we are the biggest consumers of mobile phones in the entire world, and we have the cheapest data cost in the entire world, and we have people who are making reels on Instagram from the most remotest part of the smallest states of India, right? So we may talk about digital divide. It does exist. Yes, Instagram reels are not truly going to say that the person is well informed, but then I am saying that the tools are fairly existent, and it is only left to how well we are implementing the whole act. For example, I'd like to highlight, day before yesterday, when I was trying to install this Digiyatra for my parents when they wanted to travel. So now Digiyatra collects the data, the consent for taking the data in a much more granular way. When I installed Digiyatra the first time, it had the long terms and conditions that ma'am was pointing to. And I just checked on a box, and then I was like, I'm not going to read these terms and conditions. And then I gave a consent. But now it asks exactly that I'm taking your email address, I'm taking your date of birth, I'm taking your name. Do you say yes? Yes. And then I'm also going to take the boarding pass details that you're going to upload at this point. Do you say yes? Yes. And at last, how long do you want this consent to last for? So there is a timeline that you can set for it as well. This is a small example how things are basically evolving. So things will keep on evolving, and this will solve partially the issue of digital divide. And I feel digitalization is only bringing realization of equity in a much better manner, if not the other way around. See, with digitalization, you are trying to solve the issue of inequity of information. That is such a major thing in healthcare. Because I know there are so many friends of mine who keep calling me just to know who would be that good doctor behind, in my neighborhood to consult for such and such, issue. How would you know that? I mean, imagine it's such a simple problem, but how do you solve that? Is Google enough? Is the neighbor enough? Is a doctor friend enough? Is that the answer? That is the inequity of information that we are in, and this is just one example. Which digitalization, it is only going to solve the issue in a much much better way. People now look at Google, look at ratings, try to have a critical appraisal of their own way, looking at multiple parameters: the location of the facility, the kind of services they are giving, the feedback that people are giving, the objective way of star rating, and the subjective comments and feedback that the people write. People are doing it. So digitalization, I feel, is going to solve quite a large amount of inequity. And with regards to access also, because Telemanas is an example, E-Sanjeevani is an example, they are going to improve access. The whole point why DPDP Act came into came into picture was always my question. Why so much regulation? Regulation is not it's not the hero. It's always the villain, right? No one likes regulations, right? But why again a DPDP Act? The point probably lies on the fact that in solving all of these issues, you're also trying to create a large system of exchange of data, placing data here and there. So fixing accountability is very, very important. And I think that is what is DPDP Act here for. And we will solve this issue with slow, small steps, right? So it may not have a one single easy answer to it, but I'm saying there are answers in the pieces.
So, just to take the point from where Dr. Sushil left, is that, for access, if you ask me, the single thing which, fantastic, of course, COVID came, the government did was legalizing teleconsult. Till then, till prior to that, there has been judgments where, someone had given a telephonic advice and that went against the doctor. So today that has been legal, and of course it also says what we can do, what you cannot do. Some of them are debatable, but that increased access. Today, many doctors, at least, they would have a call coming from there and then say, okay, you go and see a doctor. At least they would know that I have to go and see a doctor. The second part is knowing, Mr. Dr. Sushil was talking about Google. I would go one step further and say that is what, ABBA has done. Now, I'm just giving you a thing. Even if I'm an MBBS doctor, I would want to say I'm an interventional cardiologist, for example. Google is not going to, ask me any of my certificates. I can put whatever I want. My patients can start rating me, and we also know that I'm not saying it can be to an extent, not using the word engineered, but I'm just saying, but if that is where the confidence of these things, go to a health professional registry. Only what has been registered and what has been accepted by the government, those qualifications will get reflected. So you can't, even by default, you can't say that an MBBS doctor as a cardiologist there. And I'm sure as days go, more, meaning people will start, it also gives access, very easy practicing, where to do. So all I'm trying to tell is the ABBA health structure itself is trying to create, because with these three things, ABBA, account, health professional registry, and hospital registry, once it gets completely implemented, I think that itself is going to be something like what, in the US and others, they call it as health grades and other things, where, people are able to even, grade someone based on some clinical skill. Last point is, you were talking about the regulator. Today, most states, of course, health regulator, central level is only at the doctor level. It is from the NMC. Unfortunately, there is no, health is a state subject. So for the hospitals, the regulator, comes from the state. And most states today has implemented the Clinical Establishment Act. And Karnataka definitely has, of course, the KPME, private medical establishment, with which certain things are there. But now, of course, I'm sure as years go, some of these digital and other things will also get adopted into that. So they become a part of the act.
Since the audience is mostly lawyers and we have 4 doctors from a medical background sitting here, so can we understand what is the level of interoperability that India is moving towards? So just to get examples, so if I have a heart condition, if I take a flight from Bangalore and reach Delhi and I suffer a heart attack, so and all the data from the Bangalore hospital will be transferred to the Delhi hospital, to the doctor who is going to treat me. And I'm also looking at the amount of stakeholders in this ecosystem, right? There are laboratories, there are pharmacies, there are healthcare providers. So is there going to be seamless movement of data between all these different stakeholders in the health ecosystem? Can you please clarify the level of interoperability that the government wishes to achieve?
So this is, I hope I'm audible. Just check the mic. So this basically what I can talk about is the utopian world where what you have stated may truly happen, right? I mean, but then at the core of everything are human beings, and they are governed by their own interests, their biases. Systems are run by humans, and the framework gives the opportunity to do it, what you are saying, and we have only seen it in small pockets of implementation where we ran a project called microsites project, where we defined a certain area and then we said anyway government hospitals are fairly compliant to abdm, though the clinical usage is way very less from desirable. But the private entities, especially the small clinics, the small nursing homes, where the most patients would like to go for a OPD consultation, how does it work? I mean, will they adapt? And will this data then again come to a government hospital? Then this government hospital sends it to a lab and all those things. Can we really see it? And we did that in 4 districts in Karnataka. So the results were good, but where we faced a challenge was sustaining it. You know, initially with some push, with some people going like the medical reps do, right? We say digital health is the product that we are selling to you. Why don't you take it? And this will ensure interoperability, XYZ, and all of that. But you know, seeing the value beyond interoperability is very, very essential, is what I would say. ABDM will not sustain by selling the story of interoperability, because at the present times, patients may not be very keen on their health records and data. I really don't know the importance of a small prescription that my neighborhood doctor has given me with the paracetamol and a antibiotic written on it. I may just throw it inside the dustbin. I don't even care. And doctors have a constraint of time. Indian setup, because the load of patients is so high, documenting a truly digital health record is extremely difficult. We may have partially digitized health records, yes, but a truly digital health record is still very difficult. And that is where we are exploring tools like ambient listening modules, where a conversation between a patient and doctor will be heard by the tool and then put into the structured EMR into the spaces where it is supposed to go. It is not basically like a speech to text or a transcriber, but a intelligent transcriber, right? What sir was mentioning, there should be a person who can do all this. Now we are saying the system can also do it, and we are experimenting with those tools as well, because we know that the most difficult area of digitizing healthcare data is where the consultation actually happens, because it's a very private space. There is a lot of legacy, exactly, and there is a lot of legacy, inertia to this change of going away from writing on a piece of paper and the infamous scribbling that we doctors do usually, right? So how do we transform from here to maybe a drop down to select a paracetamol of XYZ dosage along with the the time of or the frequency of taking it, or maybe write something and then it converts into a text and goes into a machine readable format, is something that we are already experimenting. And US, in fact, to give an example, have started facing issues. US doctors have started facing issues of something called as EMR burnout. Right? So because of the insurance mandates that US pushes, the doctors have to document everything. And in the due course, they become data entry operators, sort of decorated and celebrated data entry operators. And they face this phenomenon called EMR burnout. That's when all these new tools have started coming in. And when it comes to easing out the processes, compliances, the technology is fast evolving. I'll give you an example. For example, in an operation theater, a surgeon has to ensure that all the necessary checks have been done before he actually goes to the patient and does a surgery. This is a mandate around the US insurance framework. So, what the surgeon now does is he walks in, he starts asking questions, and the assisting nurse or the assisting doctor would go on answering. And there is a system which is listening to both of this. So, the tick happens along with the recognition that this doctor has done it and this doctor has answered it. Everything goes into the log, comes up as a PDF which can be inserted into your EMR now. So this is one example. There are multiple tools like this. Technology is there to help you. If healthcare doesn't take a front seat here, a driver's seat at this point of time in India, and does not define the requirements in the right manner, that this is how I am looking at the patient, this is what I want, then I am quite sure technology will then come up with a lot of hammers searching for nails. And we don't want that to happen. So I think it is high time that clinical practitioners should take the front seat and try translating more of their requirements to the technology people, and then we'll reach somewhere, because technology is quite strong as a tool. It's dangerous but strong. Yeah?
So, meaning in the private space, if you have to say, how it has happened is that I'm just talking, say, about Manipal health systems. We have 38 hospitals across the network. So, what we have done is all of them have this similar or the same software. Again, that is HIPAA compliant and HL7 compliant, software. So, the advantage is that you were asking, someone goes from one hospital to the other. He just have to give one consent for porting the document. Within 10 seconds it will come, because it's in the same server. Added, so even in the US, I'm just saying, if you are a patient, there are a lot of restrictions. You go see a doctor, you see 20 investigations are done. Sometimes you yourself do not have an access to all the data. You have to ask. If there is a process for it, for you to retrieve. So many hospitals, I'm not saying Manipal alone, many of them also have their individual apps. So you open, of course, there is a lot, all the DPDP Act requirements are, have incorporated, but you can able to download all of them. Now, question is, are all in a digital format? The answer is not yet, because still there is the legacy. Some of them would be handwritten, scanned and put in. Some of them are in the digital format. But what I think way forward, envisaging, I'm sure in India it would happen probably in the next 10 years, is that you would have an app maybe from the ABBA or something, where this can come seamlessly into their own app. Even today the framework is there, probably, but that seamlessness, this thing, still there is a lot of time. But I think that definitely in the next, with the way we are progressing, next 10 years, 5 to 10 years, I'm sure at least the patient will have everything. Now, if the patient is unconscious, who will open his phone?
It's a medical emergency.
And not only that, how will we know that even his hospital number is so and so? So there are some of the questions still we don't have answers.
Hey, yeah, I think this is working. So I'll quickly, point out two things. One about, equity, when we were talking about equity and, in terms of digitization. So, very recently in August, I was in Montreal for a AI Congress. It was a A-Star AI Congress. I was representing Telemanus there. So we had this question by a fellow Chinese, engineer who was interested in the Telemanus model and how, what we are doing. in terms of that. So there's a and recently in May, if you read, there was by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, they've taken out a modular telecom survey of 2025, which says 96% of households in India have smartphones. So aged between 15 to 29, people have used smartphone in the last 3 months. And when we talk about rural India, so it is around 95 to 96%. Again, urban is 97, rural is 95. So in terms of the household, 85% of rural households have access to smartphones. At least one person in the household has smartphone. Like, Dr. Kumar was also pointing out that, there is enough smartphone penetration. It is easy for us now to implement it. And we've seen it, firsthand in Telemanas. So when we're talking about interoperability, Telemanas is absolutely digital. We do not use any pen and paper currently. So you can call from any corner of India. Your number gets registered and, it is anonymized and, it is give you a specific ID. So the next time you call, even, the first time you've called in Chennai, for example, but your telecom company is based out of Delhi. So they will connect you to the cell which is in Delhi, but you say, no, I'm not comfortable in talking to you in Hindi. I would rather talk to someone who speaks Tamil. So in an instant, they will connect you to a person who can talk to you in Tamil. So, the data, if you've given it to that person, you were talking in English, for example, earlier, and then you want to switch to Tamil. So, all of the data which was collected, all of the data, all of the notes which were, put by the counselor, or, if it was given to we also have a video consultation facility where e-prescriptions can be given to the patients. So if it was if a psychiatrist has seen you before, all of that remains in the system. So another psychiatrist, let's say in Tamil Nadu or in Chennai, wants to access those records, those are accessible to him. So this framework which we've built can be implemented by ABA, can be implemented by the rest of the country. So because this is absolutely seamless, what we've done. This is with the help of IIIT, Bangalore, and NHSRC that we've been able to do that. So I mean, it is possible. All of this is possible. And although we just cater to mental health needs, but I'll also tell you, we do get calls from people who are trying to quit tobacco. Or people who are, having de-addiction issues. So recently in Karnataka, the Kiran helpline was, also integrated with this. We get a lot of calls from people or, women who have, certain domestic violence issues. So there's a lot of, scope which is there for, Telemanas and eSanjeevani and, other platforms to build on, which are completely digital as of now.
Yeah, I think these are very, very nice. Thank you for the very positive examples. And there's so much happening, and we are nulling along the way. So I would like to make the last point, and that would be about, also making some additional efforts for building trust in the community with the people, informing them, engaging with them, informing them in a way and manner that they understand, because we are doing such great work at various platforms. But how does it actually translate to public health good is unless the public is able to utilize and trust the systems. So I think a very short brief point that we should also invest a lot of our efforts into communicating in a simple manner that in the language people understand, and building trust and engaging with them, and I think, bursting all the myths that might be there, and having also a, helpline or other things where we could resolve some of these queries. Yeah.
Thank you so much. All those examples on interoperability and what the vision is in terms of building a digital health ecosystem in India. So a lot of my colleagues and my students are also here, and I'm sure they have a lot of questions for the panel. So the floor is open for Q&A.
Hi, thank you so much for the lovely panel, and I love the optimism here, because I also say that I love technology. We have to use it for the welfare of everyone. My question is, we talked about data retention, erasure, the different aspects about why a patient might need data. But as a lawyer, I've seen two sectors which kind of come up as an exception, which is healthcare and finance, because there are compliance laws which require you to retain data, which completely go against erasure. So has anyone of you faced such issues, or maybe at Abha where you're handling this issue?
So with ABDM, there is a very simple rule that is followed in the whole framework, saying that we follow a federated architecture when it comes to data. What does that mean? It means to say that the data stays where it was created and where it was stored. It is not going to be pulled anywhere centrally to form a repository. Okay, and the laws that govern at that point of source of collection of data are the valid laws, right? Now this conflict between the law of maintaining medical records, let's say some people say it is
10
7
years.
years, some people say it is 10 years. There's no very clear cut definition for the storage of medical records as such. And with Digital Personal Data Protection Act, there is also a clause which says that it has to go in conjunction with the existing rules as well, right? So there will be a hierarchy of rules that will be followed, and as such, as of now, I'm not sure how many people are aware of DPDP Act. So we have not really faced those challenges inside our department. Also, I think there will be a handful of people who will be able to speak on DPDP Act, or at least give a basic structure of what a fiduciary is, what a processor is, who a principal is, etc. So I think when it comes to the establishment of rules of the act, right, only then people start realizing the one-to-one thing, because they start realizing, oh, if I do this, this is what is going to happen. So that becomes more perceptible, and I think that is when we will start facing these issues. As of now, we have not really come across such direct issues, but I believe there will be a hierarchy of rules followed for each case. Huh?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the only two, whatever I can remember, Madam can also, is that NMC, Code of Professional Ethics says 3 years for all inpatient data. And then for clinical research, there are guidelines 10 years, because something's happened to the patient, 10 years here. So only these two are there. And as, Dr. Sushil pointed out, if there is some other guideline which is in, and they take a precedence. Yeah, clinical establishment.
10
Acts,
years. 10 years.
if there is something, these are through national ones, but if the state, there is something else, you may have to follow.
Thank you so much.
So, my question may sound a little juvenile here, but I really wanted to ask from a patient's perspective here, because most of us have people of old age in our homes, right? So, as ma'am outrightly pointed, that we have non homogeneous population in India. Apart from urban rural ethnicity divide, we have age divide as well. So there are certain class of people who do not understand this digital thing completely. So speaking from the most basic level here, there are people, I would take an example of my grandmom here, who do not even know their like date of birth. If we ask them, they do not know their age, actual age. So let alone the other things about themselves. So at this point, when we are digitalizing this healthcare thing, so in healthcare we take a lot of information about a person's say how can I say, like age, their lot of things they do not understand, like these people. Apart from digital, they do not understand things about themselves. So at that point, I know there it looks like it looks great on paper, consent managers are there to help them, but how actually, like, they do not understand what they are giving. So at that point, how would you address that type of the issue?
Something which we've dealt with, and when we talk about old age and geriatric population, and even rural population for that matter, and rural and geriatric, it even becomes more difficult. So we have a very nice concept. I don't know if you've heard about accredited social health activists, ASHA workers. So ASHA workers, we've had that experience personally and, first-hand experience at Telemanas, ASHA workers are beautifully, integrated into the health system in India, specifically in Karnataka. It's wonderful the way, they work here. So, each ASHA worker knows everything about their village, or their sector or the taluk where they work. So they help out these people. So what we've from our example, what we've seen, we've got multiple projects running with Harvard where we are teaching ASHA workers about mental health care and how they can educate people about consent and how and that's worked brilliantly for us. They go to each house, they help the geriatric population and the rural people or the uneducated people about teach them about how you can dial this number or take help, or even if you don't have a phone, I'll dial it for you. And so we've even have that system in place in Telemanas where if somebody calls, or a ASHA worker has one cell phone and she can make a call for 10 different people or 12 different people by giving them separate IDs, or by there's a process which we've done that. So it basically, to just sum all of it up, is there are mechanisms in place which will help to using ASHA workers, for example, to solve this problem.
Thank you so much, sir.
Just to add to what sir said, even you take away digital, even without digital, these patients would have challenges, to give a proper history, let them know what medications they are on, what was the past medical illness. So what I think the surrogate or whoever is their family, where ASHA workers are not there, or in an urban place, they play an important role even today. So I think they would have to be a surrogate. So that is where somewhere I'm sure the law will also take its course and bring very strong laws on healthcare surrogates. Who already there are some these things on end of life care coming in. So I'm sure this will also come in.
And specifically for mental health care, in the Mental Health Care Act, there is a provision for a nominated representative. Advanced directives, nominated representatives, which you've heard in the Western context, and you don't have in India. So if the Mental Health Care Act itself could, be utilized for other healthcare issues, I mean, it's already working thing. It's a law which has already worked. Yeah.
It can be used as a foundational base.
Absolutely. It can be used as a foundation for bringing it into other sectors of healthcare. Like I was talking about nominated representative, we have something called capacity assessment. So the thing which you were talking about, if the person does not understand the reason why they are giving consent, or the reason why they so the doctor basically, it's a very simple process. They find out if the person has capacity to give their consent, or to understand what they what is being asked of them. And if we deem that no, the person does not have capacity, so we work to the next level, which is a nominated representative. So we see if the person has a nominated representative. If they don't have it, so there are provisions in place. There is a medical board which can become the nominated representative, or there is this social workers which can act as the nominated representative. So the next aspect is to check for advanced directives, if they have any advanced directives which have already nominated someone in terms of if they lose capacity.
Yeah, and it is there in ICMR guidelines also that we have the concept of legally acceptable representatives or legally authorized representatives, and there is a discussion like what doctor has just discussed. Yeah.
Today it's a law.
Yeah, it's by law. Yeah.
Supreme Court has clearly laid down on advanced directives.
Yeah, so just a couple of pointed questions. Perhaps because we're lawyers and we don't understand the system very well. You said that the ABDM ABHA IDs cannot be mandated. We are nudging, we are encouraging their adoption, but they cannot be mandated. Why not?
Even Aadhaar cannot be mandated.
My understanding of the judgment is that it cannot be used in private authentication, but it can be used for government welfare services, of which health is a primary one. Right? The social contract is that you go to a government hospital and you get treated mostly for free. In return, the least you could give is your data. Right? So I don't know why I don't see any basis on which to say that we cannot mandate that everybody have an ABHA ID and force all operators to use it. The other question I have is, what does the current architecture do with homeopathy, Ayurveda, Unani, etc., which are recognized by the government as modes of, I may discard them, but lots of people do not. and so they're recognized as modes that patients go to. What happens to those health records? If somebody's gone to an Ayurved to complain of certain symptoms, it may be relevant to his health record, but the so-called allopathic practitioner that he goes to may not have access to it. So how do we treat that? And I just have a final question, and that's a provocation for all of you. Very simple. I like to read popular history. The Broad Street cholera epidemic, right? The way Dr. John Snow solved it is he violated everybody's privacy and figured out that you got ill, you got ill, you got ill, you got ill. All of you were near this particular source of water. It's the water that has the contamination. That kind of epidemiological study would have a lot of insights for us. And I don't think we're using the data available to us for those epidemiological insights. I feel like we do research just because we get a grant, and nothing of any consequence seems to have come from epidemiological research at that scale. So that is a provocation for all of you.
I'll answer the last question.
Shall I take the first? Yeah. So the first question was that why can't we mandate ABHA, right? I mean, we have taken a stand that we will not mandate ABHA. It is a stand from the government. But the whole point that is a mission means that it is flexible, and the mission is in fact ending this financial year, the first phase of the mission, and it is got to continue beyond it. Now, what comes in the second phase of the mission, we are not sure. But in our consultations, we have heard this multiple times, even from private entities, saying, why don't you mandate this? Like sir was saying, government has to give some mandates that you do it. Because otherwise, the long process of seeing value in something and then getting on board to a scheme is going to be a long shot. But mandate is the easy way out, I agree. The whole issue why we may not mandate is the problem of inability to have assurance for service, right? Now let us say there is a person who does not have an Aadhaar. He comes to my hospital. Do I say that because you do not have an Aadhaar and I am not able to create your ABHA, I am not going to give you service? We really cannot take that stand, right? It's a very practical problem. We may say that Aadhaar has, in fact, Karnataka has more than 100% saturation of Aadhaar owing to its migration and all that. If you look at the UIDAI's dashboard, it says that Karnataka has more than 100% saturation because the number of influx is way too high, right? Yeah, especially in Bangalore. And but can we conclude that this far village in Bijapur, a man who is 75 years old, maybe misplaced his Aadhaar and has dementia and does not know whether he actually has an Aadhaar, and he comes to a hospital to get his wound dressed, do I say that because you do not have an Aadhaar, I am not going to give you service? So these are some difficult questions which have to have exceptions. So for the first step is to see that we create value and people get on board. And in fact, I'll just give you some statistics that we have currently achieved at a rate which is 5 times of what Aadhaar had. So by saying that, I'm saying that people are getting on board ABHA at a rate which is 5 times that of Aadhaar. So I don't think we need mandates. It is up to the industry, it is up to the providers who create value to this. And it is about translation, it is about collaboration, technology and healthcare providers who get together to form solutions which will give value to this whole ecosystem. Because, talking about these policies, etc., are nice in a, room and, well-lit environment, people, intellectuals, etc. But when it comes to realizing the benefit, that beneficiary who is at the receiving end only wants a least turnaround time for receiving his service, satisfactory service, one doctor who can give him some assured treatment, one hospital which can look after his condition. So we need to keep that in our mind, that we are trying to solve that as a major issue. All these are only facilitators. So in the facilitation, it is left entirely to the stakeholders how well they can give value to the whole thing. How COVID gave value to UPI, and how your neighborhood chai wala started having a UPI QR code, how the auto rickshaw wala started pasting an UPI QR code is a story that we need to learn from. It is just because value was created. People started asking for it. They thought you are a low grade businessman if you don't have a UPI QR code, right? So that pressure has to be created. It will take some time, and ABHA may not be mandated, but I'm quite optimistic that the other parts of it, the facility registry, the professional registry, will have to be mandated at some stage, because it is more to do about the service delivery part, the input part, which government has a little more rights and little more power to regulate better. And it will use multiple routes, like sir was saying. Insurers will start asking. In fact, they are already asking. So IRDAI, the Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India, which governs all the insurance companies, the TPAs, everybody, they have in fact told that you should give us claims, and all these claims should be ABHA seeded now, right? And in fact, they have pushed all the TPAs and insurers to get on board this National Health Claims Exchange. Now, where we are facing a challenge is getting the provider end on the National Health Claims Exchange. The payer is onboarded, the provider has to be onboarded, and there has to be ABHA of the patient. Right? Provider, I mean to say, includes everybody: hospital, doctor. It's that ecosystem who provide the service. So once that puzzle is solved, that small piece of puzzle is solved, I'm quite sure the hospital will be forced to collect ABHA, because there is a regulator sitting on top saying, I'm not going to let your claim come into the whole purview of a validated claim checking mechanism if you are not giving me an ABHA of a patient. So that is one way of solving the problem. And the second question, I think, was regarding the Ayurveda. So that is encompassed in ABDM. We look at all systems. So any doctor, be it allopathic, Ayurveda, Unani, Ayush, the whole Ayush set, Siddha, or homeopathy. The only problem where we are facing now is yoga and naturopathy, because I believe the board is still not agreeing to get their people on board. And we have got nurses also in, we have got dentists as well in. But we have not gone beyond it. Like, we don't have for pharmacists, paramedical workers, lab technicians. But it'll go on slowly. The stakeholder list will only increase. So that is, if it answers fairly. And we also have solutions which are specifically being tailored for Ayurvedic doctors, specifically being trained for homeopathic doctors, which will have the drug list that a homeopathy specialist prescribes, which will have the drug list or procedures which an Ayurvedic doctor will prescribe, like Panchakarma, let's say. I mean, allopathy doctor will not even have an idea what is Panchakarma. He will not even have a need it to be in the the HIS, Hospital Information System. But when it is an Ayurveda doctor, he may collect a totally different history. He may want to write something about the Vata, Pitta, Kapha, etc., and their own way of assessment. And there are tools which are designed specifically for this. So, and all this is becoming more and more apparent because ABDM is there. We have a compliance structure where you can go and see today how many softwares have become compliant, how many are in the pipeline, what category these softwares belong to, whether it is a hospital management system, whether it is a lab management system, it's a pharmacy management system, it's a personal health records application, it's a government program, or it is some other tool like your smartwatch, which also collects health data, right? So it's a huge arena that we are trying to look at.
Just to also add is that ABDM has taken a lot of measures to coax. I'll give you 2-3 of them. Sir, with your permission. It's whatever I know. One is they are encouraging the hospitals. There is also accreditation boards have come with national, health digital health standards, which also encourages hospitals, to go into ABDM, register for themselves and for the patients. It's not forcing. You want an accreditation standard, you also have to do that. So again, NABH is a voluntary accreditation, it's not mandated. Now, third is also, if you want to enroll into, say, government insurance schemes, government, health insurance, then they also encourage you to have your ABHA. So there are multiple ways on which that's why we are seeing such a high rise. But it is just that, as sir said, the industry and forces will make it slowly semi-mandated to happen. And to your last question on diarrheal diseases, it is, while there could be people who are doing it on commercial and collecting data on commercial. There are a lot of, just because you talked about diarrheal diseases, I want to say only on that. I graduated, I did my post-graduation from Christian Medical College, Vellore. You can go to the Google and see, they have done one of the largest work, madam would say, on diarrheal diseases, anywhere in the world. So I'm just saying, meaning I know they have, because I know some of my colleagues, they used to have those days air conditioned these things only to go and collect stools from various villages and see how this can prevent it. And that has really made a lot of changes in the way the national meaning certain decisions are taken at the national health for the national health. So yes, it is a mixed bag. You would have people who are looking at real community, like what sir is talking, what many others. There could be commercials. That's why there is a lot of regulation. That's why all of us are there. So we'll have to see how to tackle each one. But we cannot make a blanket statement is what I want to say.
That's why it was a provocation.
Research is not about just grants, like you said. See, there are a lot of large programs in various areas. We have the cancer registry program, which has 40 years data on cancer. There are a lot of large. These are grants is a very small component, I would rather say. There are a lot of large programs. So I think I should end with that.
Just to end it, we are in the second phase of the National Mental Health Survey. We did not get any grant for the National Mental Health Survey. I mean, whatever NIMHANS had, whatever the ministry had given us, we had to work with that amount of money to, go in each and every household across the country to understand what is the prevalence of mental health disorders. So, it is a large mental health survey. It's probably the world's largest mental health survey which has happened. So, ICMR is a part of that. Madam will be able to tell you better. So, even for TB and other diseases, the data does not come on its own. So there is no grant for it. There are national programs which run. So it is again being run by the National Mental Health Program, the National Mental Health Survey. We are in the second phase of it now. So it's not only about grants. We are doing much beyond what John Snow had done at his time.
Just last point.
Yeah.
Probably what you would want to listen to is that you may say that surveys and everything are a cross-sectional activity or a short duration activity, right? Or research projects. So you may feel that when we are conducting so many programs and when we are delivering so many services, why can't that act itself as an epidemiological system, right? That is from where you were coming from is what I'm thinking. So here there are a lot of primary basic foundational issues like identifying a patient rightly, identifying the residence of a patient rightly. For example, when you went for your COVID swab to a government hospital, there used to be a lab technician who has done his DMLT degree and he is in a rush. There are probably 300 people waiting there. He'll ask, "Nesro, what is your name?" He enters something. He will not enter your full name either. You may be Prashant, or you may be Prashant Mathur, you may be Prashant Gupta. There is a Prashant after 5 people behind you. He is also a Prashant. Now, how do I identify the person correctly? Where is your house? You will say, I live in Bangalore. You will type Bangalore. Now, Bangalore has a population of 2.5 crores. Where in Bangalore? Huh? Exactly. So, these systems have to come in and build together, right? So, that is how you see the difference, what we saw in COVID when it came to vaccination. Every vaccination was backed by a identity document. So these are certain standards that we need to start following. Common masters, common identifiers. So once we do, I think program data will also suffice to this epidemiology.
So in a federated architecture, how can the government facilitate these electronic medical records for further public research, public focused research?
So the part that I was talking about regarding working on consent for collecting anonymized data is basically pointed towards this. So the whole point is that we will collect anonymized data from the patient records that are already getting pushed into their PHR apps with their consent, only to be anonymized and used for epidemiology and other such researchers and policy decisions. So that is how we are trying to solve it. And once there is a record which is coming to my personal health record application, I will have to give a consent so that this data from the personal health record, if it is machine readable, goes to somewhere center in an anonymized format and it can be used by research entities and government for data driven decisions. So that is how it is being planned to be handled, and that is the role of government fairly.
So federal architecture, you said, that one last point is what government is also trying to do. They know that health is a state subject, certain things you cannot. So there are some very important, sir would be able to tell more, very important points. What we are seeing is that they try to address it through in a roundabout way. I'll give you examples. Cost of medicines, they are trying to address it through the Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers, under which the pharmacies come under, so they bring the price control in that. Similarly, doctors, as doctors, you all come under the National Medical Commission, and the code of professional, I know draft was there, it was withdrawn, it may come sometime, I'm sure. So a consent, for example, is something which only a doctor has to take. It may not have a hospital to take. So some of the things, what we understand also, the government is trying to regulate it through where there could be a national mandate, and which could have a little uniformity. But still, it may not answer everything. The federal architecture would remain, and there could be little differences.
Thank you so much to all the panelists. I don't think we are ready to wrap up the discussion, but I think because of time limits we are. And we have refreshments downstairs for everyone. So please stay back for that. But thank you so much for accepting our invitation. This discussion is proof that lawyers should talk to scientists and scientists should talk to lawyers more, because whatever gaps we have in our regulatory system is because we don't engage with each other, because we feel the other person is talking technical stuff. So thank you so much for clarifying a lot about what is happening in the public and the private sector when it comes to digital health. We have mementos for all of you. So please stay back. I request Professor Sarasu, our director, to give away the mementos to all our panelists.
Thank you so much for coming, sir. Thank you so much.
So please stay back for refreshments, and thank you again. Thank you, everyone.